The intro is yours this time.
And welcome to the podcast, everyone. So for today's Unprofessionals podcast, I'm doing the intro this time. Today we have a very unexpected guest. We have Brian from Regular Car Reviews.
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you very much for coming. It was a very last minute thing when I saw your tweet saying jumping on any and all podcasts in the next 48 hours. I was just like, why not? Let's try. Let's see if I get a response.
Yeah, let's try it.
And yeah, so we also have, as stated in the last podcast, we have Rash Laobi, who has joined the podcast as a part of the team.
You
Bonjour tout
poor
le monde.
sucker.
And it's an absolute pleasure to meet you at last, Regular Car Reviews. I've been a fan
thank you.
Since I think probably about 4 years at least.
Mhm.
So I'm totally fanboying out here.
Oh.
So as I was saying earlier, I've been watching for I think since like 2014ish at least.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I think the actual first one I saw was the Hayabusa episode.
Were you looking to buy a Hayabusa back then?
No. I just got it. Someone linked it to me, I think, and said, "Here, listen to this and watch this." And I was just like, "Yeah, why not?" I put it on, and I was in tears. I was laughing so hard because I actually, went to school with a few people like that.
Oh, who had Hayabusas?
No, that would hang around at gay bars waiting for someone to.
Oh, for real?
It.
Oh man.
Yeah, that kind of. I
That
went
sucks.
to school with them. That they weren't exactly that kind of person, but they were that kind of personality. They were very full of themselves. It was. So, first things first. Normally, we don't do a lot of car type stuff on here, but opportunities. But
Basically, Dead Meat's fanboying out. He saw the opportunity and wanted it. I'm actually interested in for a couple areas, and I'm backseat driving this podcast, guys. I'm going to be all the way back here. This is all Dead Meat's one, but I'm really interested in a couple of things. I actually haven't been following you for all that long. I have caught some of your stuff.
Okay.
I know Dead Meat would have been the one who linked me the first video. I can't remember what the first one I caught up was. I know I have watched your more recent videos. I think they're more recent anyway, when you were playing around with some of the tanks and some of the equipment that were going on in there. So I found those really cool.
Yeah.
The big thing that I'm interested in is we rarely have anybody that sort of deals with anything outside of the digital world on the podcast, or I very rarely get to speak with anybody who actually deals with real life equipment. So considering what's going on in the world at the moment, what the hell do you do when you can't go out and do anything anymore?
The situation, as it is in the United States, varies greatly state by state. There are some states that have no lockdown at all. I think it was Kentucky. Don't quote me on it. But that's the way our goofy government is set up. You have there is always a tug and pull to who's in charge. Is it the federal government or is it the state's governments? That's why cannabis is completely legal in some states, even though it is federally Schedule 1 illegal. So it's simultaneously legal and illegal, depending where you are in the United States. And the same applies to the Rona. So in my state, I live in Pennsylvania. I live about 3 hours from New York City by bus. Although now with no traffic, you can probably get there in like 2.5 hours. Man, if you had a Hayabusa, you could probably get that down to 2. We were mentioning before the show how someone in Victoria was fined for just going to the store to get school supplies. There was an arrest in Pennsylvania. for somebody violating curfew, but it's very in Pennsylvania. It's a very case by case basis. And now this person was out at 1 a.m. driving. Would it be appropriate for me to say driving like a bogan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense.
They were just out cruising around, and so they really didn't get pulled over for being out, but they did get nailed in addition to reckless driving. I can go out as I please. There is a state mandate in Pennsylvania that you should have a mask on, but the language is still very murky. And so yesterday, I was driving my Falcon around, and for those of people who don't know regular car reviews, I'll give who are listening to this who are unfamiliar with this YouTube channel. We review cars and we do a lot of dirty jokes about them. We got started by just doing friends' cars, some low, whatever you have growing up. The very first video was my Toyota Echo. I believe in Australia it was always called the Yaris. Probably the same goes for Ireland as well. For whatever reason, a lot of the manufacturers like to give Yankees different names because they figure they won't buy it if it has the original name. I don't get it.
Well, to be fair, with something like the Z cars, the Fair Ladies, that's probably a fair call.
Fair Lady, yes.
Oh yeah, yep.
Anyway.
Yeah, it is pretty cool though. When you go to a car show, people want the original badging from Japan. They'll pry that stuff off. They want to have Fair Lady Z on the back. And also, I think one of the things that perplexes me, since we have, almost from all four corners of the globe going on with this podcast, I was surprised to know that Volkswagen had an entire sub-tier called Seat, or I believe it's pronounced Seat, which is huge in Ireland. Because I saw this other YouTube channel. Yeah?
Yeah. They're made in Spain, but they're owned by Volkswagen.
Oh, that's so weird.
Yeah.
But you open up the hood, and I was the YouTube channel was called AVE, and he took a vacation. I forget where in Ireland, but for a while he just talked about this car, and it's like, yeah, it's supposed to be Spanish, but you open the hood and it's just all VWAG on the inside. General Motors did that for a little while.
I was about to say, if you think stuff like that's weird, you need to come down and have a look at some of what we've got down here in Australia, particularly in the truck sector, and look over the history of it and where certain things came from. Like I know, because I used to work in car detailing when I was much younger, not so much on the mechanical side, but back when I could actually see the cars properly enough to tell whether or not they were clean or not. That's changed since then. I used to do car detailing as one of my things that I came out of. I worked for Nissan, worked for Ford Australia, Holden. I was in Porsche at one point, BMW, Mercedes. So I worked a few of the yards and the rest of it. And you talk to the mechanics and find out where different things come from, and they used to drive them up the wall for it. Like in the mid 2000s, one of the Ford flatback light trucks, it was badged as a Ford, but it was actually using Korean-made components that were manufactured in South Africa by Isuzu.
What?
Yeah. There wasn't a single Ford component in the entire vehicle outside of the badge on the front. And even that was probably printed in China. There was nothing about it. And it wasn't alone. There were vehicles, particularly in that sector, the transport, any of the light trucks, heavy rigids. They are bits of vehicles down here. The Chevys aren't really Chevy. The Chevys are actually made somewhere else. Our own cars, the Commodore line, our main General Motors Australia, sort of officially died. It took its final death this year. so it's officially gone. But if you roll back to the start of the Commodore range,
They
which
started
is
as an
Australia's top seller, they started as an Opal. They were an Opal shell with an interior change, and we changed. I think they were originally front-wheel drive in Europe, but we made them rear-wheel drive and put a V8 in the front on something that was supposed to be a
Nice.
front-wheel drive 4-cylinder automatic, and I think they had a diesel option.
Yeah, we also stuck our old school straight 6 202 into it as well, which is an engine that came from the 60s, and they kept producing it up till I think 1985 is where they stopped using it, at least in the Commodore.
To be fair, the reason why they kept it around since the 60s, though, is because the bastards wouldn't die. It didn't matter what you did to them. They were bulletproof. I know one person who managed to bring one of those back, and it wasn't just only running on 5 cylinders. It only had 5 cylinders. Number 6 was literally out the side of the block, and the engine still ran well enough to drag itself home. It was knackered when it got there, and it only had to go about 20 Ks, but it drove on 5 with one out of a block. They were damn near indestructible, and even when you did manage to get them to that point, they still wanted to run. So
that's amazing.
Can confirm.
Holden was reluctant.
My dad had one of those, and the blue motor, the 202. If you let it idle, the oil pressure would drop to nothing. Yet he kept driving it.
What?
Yep. So you keep the engine running, the oil pressure would keep up, and eventually the engine died. I believe it put a rod out the side of the block.
I am looking up right now. Holden 202 motor.
Straight 6 202. I had my first car actually had one of those. My first car was a VC Commodore wagon with a straight 6 202. I think it was a red motor. And I kept that for years because it kept through my P-plate period until I switched over to my Statesman, which was only about a year later, which is I had a WB Statesman Caprice, which is basically an Australian Cadillac with a 5-liter up front.
Okay.
And it was a pretty nice bit of gear. I sort of missed that car, but I kept the Commodore as my work hack and my bush basher and wherever I needed to go. And then eventually it became the loaner car to essentially anybody who had a vehicle breakdown. If your vehicle failed or it had to go into the shop or anything else, don't bother spending the money, hire one. Just take the VC. The keys are probably in the ignition parked in front of the house, and that's fine. And then my father, after he left the Air Force, came back to take over a dairy property, my grandfather's dairy property. And one of the things in the area that I live in, we have a lot of backpackers come through, people generally from Europe, some from Canada, some from the States every now and again, although US backpackers are actually relatively rare. Europe's far more common. Germany and England in particular, and Canada are the 3 highest. But we had them come through, and every year we would go through a bunch of backpackers. And of course, they needed transport. And one of the deals with working on the property was they would get transport. So once again, they'd get the Commodore and they'd drive it up to Queensland or wherever else. I think we worked out at the end of it, we did an engine rebuild on it, and it was the first engine rebuild that engine had ever had when I first got it. Now, this was 2000, around 2000, I picked up the car. 2001, I got my piece, so I could actually drive it on my own. And this was a car from 1981. And it had its first engine rebuild in 2000. And that
I'm
was
looking at pictures of it right now.
Yep.
On Wikipedia.
The VB Commodore, VC Commodore, what they could do the VH. There was another model in between that was very
VK, VH, and then you went to VL, which was essentially Australia building a Skyline with a different shell. Is what that was.
So the Commodore, the VL Commodore in 1986 got a Nissan RB30 engine, which was basically
really.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
including complete with the turbos and all of the bullshit as well as and one of the options. It was essentially a GDS turbo Skyline
with a body like that. I kind of like that.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
They got the VL turbos in particular were very, very popular. There was a story where my dad not my dad, my oldest brother. He had a VL Turbo. When it was still recently new, it was only like 3 or 4 years old from when it was first produced. He picked one up and was driving along at night on the way home from work. Had a little bit of a micro sleep. Woke up, going sideways along the median strip between the two lanes. Crashing through all these tiny little sapling type trees at about 180 kilometers an hour. My brother wasn't the smartest driver. Let's put it that way. He had a long running disagreement with the police about which license was the correct one for him. He lost his license about 7 or 8 times.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I'd say he wasn't. But anyway, he had a micro sleep and woke up going sideways down this median strip in a VL Turbo, going sideways and then spun round, just basically denting both sides of the car up significantly. Significantly, it was a write-off according to the insurance company, but the body shell was still, it hadn't twisted or had any damage that would prevent it from being repaired and put back on the road. It just was was just going to be cost more than the car was worth for a panel beater, to fix it up.
I've seen 1930s boat tails restored before. Write-off is relative.
Yeah, so
anything can be fixed.
So basically, he got the value of the car back on insurance, paid a fraction of it, got the car fixed. So anyway, that was a
totally sideswiped down both sides, right?
Yep.
Still driving it around.
He wasn't driving it around, as I think they took his license off him for a little bit for that one.
Oh.
So it was quite entertaining.
Well,
I
tried to send you guys a link and it came out weird. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's the link to your VP Commodore. So that's actually
the only Commodore I drove.
Yeah. So that had the Buick 3800 engine.
Yep.
That was a very well thought of engine. It wasn't exactly the smoothest or most refined, but it meant that they didn't have to spend a lot of money to pay Nissan for their arguably better straight six.
Right. The 3800 is the 3800, 2800 are everywhere in the United States, still running okay today. They're probably, if you need a cheap car, like sub $1,000, and you need something that can be repaired cheaply, that's probably going to be your best bet. I don't know if the Ford Modular, I'm pretty sure the Ford Modular came to Ford Australia.
We got that on the BA Falcons.
The
5.4 litre modular V8.
Although that would be a different block.
That's Ford, not Holden. Sorry. Or was the modular Ford or Holden?
No, the modular Ford was Ford small block that replaced the Ford Windsor block.
Yep.
Oh, I don't like RV8s get down to you in some applications, but I guess the cultural differences, Australia and New Zealand favor the straight sixes over
that's
V8s in most cases.
That's for the base models. The straight sixes, the big sixes, they've got you drove a Falcon down there, I think a BA or BF Falcon.
Yeah.
Was that the 6?
That was a 6, no turbo.
Yeah. So that's 180 kilowatts and all the torque you can poke at. So you just, doesn't matter what gear you are, just put my foot down and it just pulls like a diesel. That's why
Please
we
tell me
like
you
them.
drove one in. Please tell me you drove one in Ute configuration.
I'm sorry.
A Ute version with a Ute version of the BA with a straight 6.
We didn't get a single Ute while we were down there.
You should have.
Now we
Okay.
were in New Zealand, so it was a little bit slimmer pickings, and we did a little bit like we had a bigger selection in Auckland, but then when we went down to Wellington, it was most of the car scene that I saw in Wellington was a lot of Skylines and a lot of Euro stuff.
Yeah.
We didn't see like big highway bombers because there are no highways. So a car like that kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense. With the exception of that museum that had the tanks in it, that was owned privately. And we were down there. It was called the Manly Auto Museum or the Manly, either Manly Military Museum or Manly Military Museum. And it was owned by just this guy who had inherited all this stuff from his grandfather, who was in the war, and just had it. And he said, "You want to go drive this Brencan carrier around?" And I said, "Like what, on the road?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he said, and I said, "Well, what if the police do anything?" And he just joked and said, "Well, I have more tanks than the government does right now, so we'll be fine." So
he's not actually kidding, which is sad. Yeah, the New Zealand military is it's interesting. I want to take the piss out of it, but at the same time, it's kind of sad.
how so?
All right, so
Which much love to New Zealand. I'm coming back again for a third time. Yeah.
I don't blame you. It's beautiful there.
It's a beautiful country, absolutely beautiful country.
Pity about the New Zealanders.
Essentially, no military budget at all. I don't think they have any active main battle tanks at all in service. I know they have. I don't think they've got any fighters. I think the most advanced military aircraft they have is a couple of C-130s that they use for flying transport missions, and that's about it. It's essentially a Coast Guard service.
Interesting.
Yeah, great troops. Almost no hardware. The country just doesn't budget any hardware into its or put any money into its defense like that at all. It's
It doesn't need to.
Yeah, true. It doesn't, because anything that comes down this end of the world has got to roll through Australia first. And quite frankly, if we get flattened, it's easier to surrender if you don't have the military, because anything that goes through us is, at that point, it's probably gone through the US Pacific Fleet as well. And like nothing New Zealand has is ever going to stop it. So it makes sense from one end, but it's just they don't have anything really at all. They have no functioning air force and really nothing in the way of real armor or anything else. So yeah, his joke about having more tanks in the military is completely accurate. He would have
it was wild. It was just this little shop down there, and we're just climbing around stuff. I forget what type of tank it was. I can look it up here in a moment, but the engine started, but the transmission needed something. But the engineering genius of the turret on this tank was it was all gear reduction. So there was no hydraulic assist on it. So the person operating the turret, turning it was a crank. And I think this was like either a late 70s or an early 80s design. And it was a crank with the radius of about your keyboard. And you just turn this crank and you're moving 7 tons or maybe 3 tons around. And we're just, big gear, smaller gear? Smaller gear, bigger gear, bigger gear, bigger gear. And then around it goes. And you could do it with, I think I did it with 3 fingers. And he just said, just don't move the cannon too far, you'll hit the wall. So he could move it into the garage and the cannon had to be faced to the right. So you could turn it all the way to the right, but if you turn it back center, you're going to hit the office. So don't do that. He said in that unbelievably cathartic, sweet, dripping, delicious pie accent that I wish I could distill into a pill and take it before I go to sleep. I can't get enough of the Kiwi accent. It's just so fuzzy and warm.
It's not too far. Mags, just for reference, the straight 6 Falcon that he drove was a BF XR6.
Okay, yeah, it's still the
Non-turbo.
same one. Yeah, I was just going to say in that regard, it's my old work truck was the an XR6, BA XR6, so same engine, basically same setup, same power, but I had the 1-tonner with none of the extra gear on the back. So essentially, think the sedan cut off right behind the driver and passenger seats at the front, and then just a 1 centimeter or probably 1.5 centimeter steel tray on leaf springs and no additional weight attached to the rear of the vehicle at all, anywhere.
That's so interesting because that was something I saw down there, and I guess when we come to Australia, we'll see that again. Seeing a flatbed, as we call it, is usually only reserved for heavy construction and fleet vehicles, meaning you work in a mine or something like that. Your average person wants a box on the back, but down there, everybody wanted the trays, and I just found that interesting.
It's practical for workspaces. I mean, the thing is with our Ute setups, everything is essentially a fleet vehicle. Everything is a tradie vehicle, and everything needs to be bolt onto it. The popular thing down here is you get a Ute with a tray. If you're building a work Ute, if you're getting something with a tub, chances are it's actually more of a performance vehicle. It's a toy. You don't really put a lot in the back of those. I mean, the top end HSV models of the Commodore Utes, when they were all done up, the tub was carpeted. They were essentially really big boots. Nobody was putting work stuff in that, but you bought them and they went like hell because no weight over the rear axle and 400 plus horsepower in the front.
Yeah.
You can imagine all the fun you can have when you turn that little traction control button off. It just went off. But when it comes to the work trucks, the popular thing is, and my old man, even now, he's getting into retirement mode, and he's got one set up. It's he's got a big twin cab 4-wheel drive, sort of like a small pickup by US standards, with the flatbed tray, the 1-ton tray out in the back of it. But what he does is when he's doing his work stuff, it's just got the tray on it, but he has a cage that can be bolted into that tray, and that cage can be switched out for whatever he needs. So if he's going camping, he's got one that's got side boxes in it and rails that has all his camping gear, and his fishing rods are bolted into it and the rest, and he just hoists it up onto the 1-ton tray and drops the locking pins into place, and that's it. He's basically ready to rock and roll. And the same goes for the tradies. They get the 1-ton tray, and then they'll build a custom slide in for work that will have, say, you're an Alecki. It'll have all your Alecki testing gear, your cables, all your bullshit, and that'll be bolted into the tray in the back. And then you want to clear it because you need the space to do something else. Where you pull 4 locking pins, slide it straight out in the 1-ton trays there, and you go load whatever you need up. And it's just very, very, very flexible. And that traded down into the Ford Utes. And this is why the Ford Utes were more popular as work vehicles, and you'll see more 1-ton configured Ford Utes, because the Holden Utes, as cool as they were, the tub was integrated into the chassis, so you couldn't switch them out like that. Or at least on most of the later models was like that. So they were basically 2-door sports cars with massive boots. Very few people got one of those and never actually used it for any kind of work. But the Ford Utes were really popular because you could put the 1-ton tray on them and do that with them the same as you would with 4-wheel drives. And you could load the hell out of them too. Actually, I'll dig up an old photo here while you guys talk.
Okay.
Of my old truck. I might have to do a bit of photo editing on it, so I think the number plate's still. I'll dig it up.
So I'm curious because when I see the, I don't know, should I call it Ute culture? Because to me,
that's what it is.
Like, I'm wondering, like, what is underneath, and I hope to crawl underneath these. What the rear suspension travel on those is about the same as a sedan.
Yep.
So I'm used to seeing, a truck with like a foot of suspension travel in the back, knowing that if you
stiff.
overload it, it will plop down. The rear axle will just sit on the stops. It probably won't be, excuse me, good for the drive shaft, but you're not going to be scraping over bumps and stuff like that.
Okay, so your Utes are generally full chassis. The Ute models, as much as they look like cut down versions of our sedan models,
Mm-hmm.
in most cases, however, were not actually based on the sedan chassis. They were based on the LTD and the Statesman chassis, which were our big, full-size Cadillac, all the crap bolted into them, luxury car models.
Okay.
They're sort of larger again than our standard sedans. So they're full chassis underneath. All the sedans and the luxury car models had independent rear suspension. The Utes, leaf springs.
Okay.
They pull them out and they put leaf springs in, and they put some heavy duty leaf springs in the back of them. And even then, most people that go out and buy them that are intending to use them as work utes, the first thing they'll do is roll them around, take the stock springs, stock leaves out, and put even harder ones in, so to get a higher loading capacity. The idea, the regular turn for them with the flatbed trays on them is 1 tonners, and that is the Ute should be capable of carrying 1 ton load over the axle.
That's a metric
why,
ton. I don't know if that makes a difference, but
now
that's
actually
it's
the
different,
area.
but
It's actually the area where the Holden Utes dropped out, because they didn't get the 1 ton tray option because they had integrated tubs, and they had a little bit less play in the suspension in the back end as well, because they were essentially 2-door sports cars. You could only really get them up to about 750 to 800 kilograms over the back end with all the heavy carry conversions. So they tended to be less out. But yeah, they'll carry a ton over the back axle when they're all kitted and ready to rock and roll.
Just to interrupt here. So firstly, the tank was a 1950 M41 Walker Bulldog.
Okay.
Just looking at your videos there. The second thing is, just wondering if you had to dispose of your underwear and probably your pants after driving Tavares's Lamborghini Gallardo.
That thing. Okay. Tavares, for people who are more into video games and flight simulators who are listening to this, Tavares is another YouTuber. He builds things. He builds cars and has build videos. And when I say build cars, I mean just like fixes up and flips sometimes and builds crazy things. His latest thing is buying old movie hero cars.
Yeah.
A hero car is the one that's going to be seen on the screen. And he bought one of the Lamborghinis from Fast and the Furious, one of the Fast and the Furious movies. And then he also bought one of the Pimp My Ride. I don't know if they exported it to Australia.
Yeah, it's a Chrysler Caravan, was it?
Yep. In the US, we had 3 different sub-brands for that van. It was very strange. But they were all under Chrysler.
Yeah.
So we also had Plymouth and we had Dodge, but they were the same thing. They just put different badges on them.
Yeah.
Not my point.
Just for the Australian and possibly New Zealanders watching, it's just similar to the Toyota Tarago, that kind of people mover van, the thing you buy when you've given up on life and you've got kids.
That is the Plymouth Voyager, which is the same thing as the Chrysler Voyager or Chrysler Caravan. You see those things in the US, we're talking early 2000s. The ones from the 90s and 80s have all rotted away. But you see like a maroon or a forest green Plymouth Voyager rolling down your street, or the Grand Voyager that got you like an extra metric that got you an extra 20-25 centimeters of cargo space. They stretch the chassis a little bit. And I'm seeing a picture now of what looks like a Falcon Ute with a slightly extended cab and a
That is that was my old work truck. That's a standard BA with the XR6 rims and the 1-ton tray on the back. It had the improved leaf springs on the back end of it. So that thing there was, I think it had 1.1 ton rated for the back end. That's not a shot with a load that was mocked up. That was me just driving it around the paddock, picking up some loose square bales that the machine didn't pick up. So I was actually working and took a shot of it. What was interesting about that one, and you can
I
pop
like
that
the
up on stream.
wheels.
I don't think
I'll
you can see.
if I can.
Yeah, they were not stock. They are the ones off the XR6, which I'll get you a photo of in a second, because I owned an XR6, BA XR6 as well. But what was interesting about that one as a work truck, what they did, the work truck options, and this is a very old shot because this has my daughter in it, and my daughter is now 13 going of 14 this year. So you'll see there's a bit of an age difference here.
Oh,
But if you zoom in on that, you'll notice
Okay.
that's a bench seat and that's a column shift.
yo,
So
I love it.
column shift, auto, bench seat, 3-seater up front in that with a 1-ton tray, 1.1 carry capacity over the axle, and that is probably the best shot I've got where you can sort of see what's going on underneath, because there's nothing where it bolts onto the back. It is literally the straight down. They take the sedan body. It's, as I said, it's on the full length chassis. They take the sedan body, and if you look, they basically cut it in half a little bit further than just behind where the B pillar would be, and put a plate in the back end of it and pop in a window. The front seats in the bench, even on the bench seat, the driver and passenger seats, if you reached around behind them, still had the magazine racks for what would be the passengers in the back seat of the sedan to have access to. And then the chassis just runs straight out of the back with the leaf springs and all the stuff completely naked. And then from there, you'd either get a tub slid over the top, which they all came with by default, and then you had your 1-ton tray that you'd bolt on. And over there in the background, I just realized it's actually got my old Statesman, and I believe that's my old VK in the background
cool.
as well. But yeah, that was the work truck configuration in about as work trucky a configuration as you could get, outside of having the flashy rims on it because they were shiny.
Nice. I
And
like it.
still what, 250 horsepower out of the straight six, I think it was. And that 1-ton tray on the back may have been able to carry 1,100 kilos, but it weighed nothing. So you had the little traction control button inside of the cab as well. You hit that one there, and it didn't matter whether it was wet, didn't matter whether it was dry. Put it in. You didn't even need to go into manual shift to put it in drive and slam the accelerator straight to the floor. Both tires lit instantly, and it was out sideways and doing all sorts of fun stuff. And yeah, I used to drive it on dirt roads, so I spent more time sideways than I did going forwards in the bloody thing. It was great. It was a good truck.
Man, you bring one of those things to the US and just take it to a car show. People would just crowd around it. Every now and again, they try to bring Utes to the United States, and every single time
we
it
tried.
fails.
Yeah, we tried. And there was a reason for it. The reason was the US is a bit like Australia. You like your V8s
Mm-hmm.
if they're an option that's available. All of our Utes have V8s. The thing was, the Ford Utes were the modular 5.4 liter performance engine out of the States.
Okay.
I think the one that basically the Mustang engine is what the XR8s had. So that was the V8 option that was available, although the Australian one, detuned, but you can fix the detune. The Holden ones the earlier ones were the Gen 3 5.7, and then they went up to the 6 point whatever they're at up to now.
They had the 308 still, or 304 in that at the end of it where they had it fuel injected. Then they went to the LS1, which was 5.7. Then they went to the LS3.
Yeah. Now, these were again detuned for the Australian market because, our government's a bunch of wankers. But the thing was, these engines could be retuned quite easily. So what you had was a 2-door performance car that could be claimed to be a utility vehicle with sports car clearance levels that, because of the way we had our setup, essentially had sports car suspension in all of these by default.
I was
With
wondering
an engine,
when the El Camino would pop up.
Yep. Yep. With an engine in front that could, with probably a weekend in the shop, be retuned to match or outperform Corvette, Camaro, and Mustang. And it would sell for
Gotcha.
cheaper. And that's why they didn't want it over there, because they knew exactly what would happen. Everyone would buy one of those. They'd buy the sporty version with all the nice lines and the nice hard roof lid, boot lid. So turning into basically a big boot or a big trunk. And they'd park the cars. They'd drive the car out of the showroom, and they'd drive it straight around to the local mechanics and tell them to do their thing to the engine, and drive them straight back out again with 600 horsepower under the front and blowing the door handles off everything that Ford and Chevy was selling in the States. It would essentially just ruin the performance car market overnight.
Yeah, it's nothing can threaten the Corvette. It has everything has there. You know the story of the Buick Grand National.
Oh yeah,
that car,
V6 turbocharged.
Yep. That at the time was faster than the Corvette in the 80s. And then General Motors said, no more of that. Can't do that. They just didn't tell. Like back then, each subdivision had more freedom to do what they wanted. There was less oversight. So they just created this thing and just kept upping the boost pressure until they had this thing that just was the fastest accelerating car in America at the time, at least for a mass production car. But yeah, they try the Utes in the U.S. and it just doesn't work. And one of the things that my friends, the Johnsons from New Zealand, saw when they came over here is that Subaru tried to sell a Ute in the U.S. that they didn't bring in yet.
Yep.
Later than the Brat.
It's actually called the Brumby in Australia.
Yep.
The Brumby?
Yep. Brumby. Subaru Brumby. It's the same car, except we didn't have the dicky seats in the back.
Yeah, it got a momentary. It's kind of got a little bit of a popular following over here. I think it's got one in the States too, but it was only for a very short period of time. There was this weird moment in the gap between the 80s leading into the 90s where I think even Ford and Holden for a very short period of time
the Baja,
actually dropped.
That's a different beast altogether. That's an Outback with the back lopped off.
Yeah,
Subaru
yeah,
Brumby.
it's a Subaru Outback. Yeah, that's the Brumby, and yeah, that's a Subaru Outback above. A very old one, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not really an Outback. It's an Outback with the boot, like the rear section.
Yeah, it's like it's had a trim. Yeah, it's had a trim.
Yeah. Yeah, that car.
All this on stream so people can see what the hell we're talking about.
Okay. I'll put this up. So put that up there. Oh, it's up there. I try not to put a whole lot in the way of. So.
Subaru Baja.
That is the Brumby.
Yep. And there we go. Just to spruik your channel there a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, you've got the Brat there as well. I'll that up as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, those have popped up on stream.
And I'm gonna throw the post here because that's the other one. That's the XR6 that I had. That was the day driver.
Nice.
I missed that as well.
I enjoyed driving the similar one that I had for a day down in New Zealand, and it was very strange to me that I was able to see a modern car that had the word Falcon or modern Ford that had the word Falcon on the back, because they stopped doing the Falcon in the United States in 1970 and a half. Through the half year, they stopped it. Yep. So when I bought my Falcon, I have a first generation, one of the first ones made in 1960. And when we were rebuilding it, changing it, or rather when my mechanic Bruce Henn was doing it, we're pulling suspension parts off of it. And even then, the very first year, you flip them around, like the upper part that you wouldn't see, like on the lower A-arm, and it just says made in Australia on it. I'm like, even then, like in the very beginning, they did all the testing in Australia, and then they brought it to the US.
So, just going back to the Tavares thing, the van you mentioned.
Oh, yes.
That we got completely sidetracked, and do you see what I mean? Why I try just let the chat go wherever it goes, so we just ramble on. So that van, they dropped it off to a certain YouTuber called Hoovy. Have you had any contact with him? You've spoken to
We know
Tavares,
of
obviously.
each other, and we've mentioned each other on our individual channels.
Yeah.
But he lives, I think, down in Atlanta, which
I thought
is
he
the
was down in
equivalent of
Texas.
yeah, it's quite far.
Yep.
And he's very, very busy.
Yeah.
And we wanted to do something. We'll run into each other after a while.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, the van.
I'd love to see you actually. It was actually a segue into talking about Hoovy, because it'd be fantastic to see you actually dig in and get into a whole heap of Hoovy's hoopties, as he calls them.
Yeah.
Just that you'd have a field day with that lot.
Mm-hmm. He did mention me once when I went to. There's a place in Pennsylvania, but it's known in the car community across the whole of the U.S. There's a town called Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Carlisle is a town built around a gigantic fairgrounds. So they have car shows there all the time, huge, thousands and thousands of people. And their big one every year, and it's every stereotype you imagine. It's called Corvettes at Carlisle, and it's the national gathering for all the Corvette owners. And all the jean shorts, all the New Balance sneakers, all the Rolex Submariner watches, all the mullets.
I'm sorry.
It's straight Republican, pro-Trump, everything for 3 days. All nice people, totally nice people, but it's just this isn't SJW stuff, but it's like the very privileged people who don't know their cars really aren't that good. That's the whole thing about Corvettes are great. They're great, but they're not worth the money that people think they are. And it's a strange. It's almost like Corvettes are like Bitcoin. They have value because people say they do. But and no one wants to budge on the price. Everybody's Corvette is rare. Everybody's Corvette is one of a kind. Like, I have the number 3. This was one of 300 that was painted on this color on this Tuesday in May of 2011. And that was when this one guy was working in HR that day. So he was about to be transferred. So and he looked at this car. While he went to on the way to the bathroom. So and I have documentation to prove this, and this is only one of 3 that has a slightly different stitching on the automatic gear level. My name's Henry. My penis goes inward, so that makes it rare too.
I'm hearing you doing your rant there, and I'm also just over and over in my head is yourself and Nick just going, my car is best car because just over and over and over.
My Corvette is best Corvette because I put chrome louvered taillight covers on it that I bought at a drugstore.
I'm hearing parallel.
You've been too quiet, Crash.
I'm hearing a real life description of the car version of Flight Simulator, if it counts.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm also hearing guitar collectors. You will never meet a community more like that than guitar collectors. You know?
Do they play their instruments?
They claim they do, but when they make videos of them playing, the evidence reveals otherwise. But you actually just hit that exact spot. You will get guys claiming that a certain type of paint affects their tone, and that's why their tone is so much better than next year or the previous year's model or the following year's model. And it's just crazy. I'm glad that exists in other places.
Mm-hmm.
It exists in every community. I've not seen one community that doesn't exist in some level. I when I was going through TAFE, which is Brian, it's a technical school, so tertiary education. You finish high school. It's not university. Maybe college. I'm not sure. It's a school focusing on technical and physically applicable stuff. So you're building you're building trades, your electrical trades, whatnot. Now I went through TAFE doing electronics and system administration, computer work type stuff. But I was living in the accommodation there. The majority of the students living in that accommodation were horse studies students. So horse breeders, jockey, training to be jockeys.
I presume they're now in adult entertainment, are they?
Yeah.
They certainly knew how to ride. They had the motions right. So
they all saw the video of Mr. Hands.
I only showed that to one of them, and I decided it probably wasn't a good idea to show it to any of the others, because there's several reasons I won't get into, but let's just say I got quite lonely after a short while there.
Horsey people are an interesting breed. I live in rural Victoria, so we're sort of surrounded by them, and these are people that they'll mortgage their own houses in order to keep another horse.
Really?
They will give up all kinds of stuff. Like, you occasionally get a few that are really well off and can afford to keep the animals. The vast majority can't, so they will live in a absolute dump and be struggling to scrape together everything just so they can have their 4 horses out the back. It's insane.
Do they claim the horses understand them?
Sometimes, yes.
They are just, yeah, they're weird people in general. I don't get it.
I think the weirdest thing was that my roommate for the first little while that I lived there, he was a trainee jockey, and it was, we had cupboards and shared fridge and everything, but he would keep all his food in tubs in his room, apart from stuff that needed to be refrigerated, and even the stuff he put in the refrigerator, tubs, and perfectly portioned out for each and every single meal. It was intense. But he was the most probably normalist person in that accommodation, myself included.
So when you say all his food is in tubs, we're talking about like little plastic containers?
Little plastic containers, but also big like storage tubs. So he'd have it all sort of portioned out into, like he'd have his cereal in a certain weighed proportion. So he'd actually physically put his cereal into a container on a set of scales.
Huh.
Because
was he fit?
He had to stay a certain weight, because if you get over a certain weight for a jockey, you can no longer be a competitive jockey. So, if you've ever met any jockeys, they're all tiny people, and they sound like leprechauns, high squeaky voices.
Interesting.
Something Laobi might be a bit more familiar with than us.
Yeah, they kind of sound like stage midgets. That's really the closest. Very high-pitched voices. I went out with a girl once, and her mum, this family were particularly wealthy, and the first time she brought me home, and coincidentally, the last time she brought me home, we went out to her house, and they had stables and horses, and her mum asked me a very simple question, to which there are two meanings. She asked me, did I ride? And because there was a slight pause, and I kind of looked at her open mouth and then said, oh, horses, no, I was never invited back.
Man.
Yeah.
I'll just since I'll try get us back onto a more pertinent topic.
Yes.
Your video, Mr. Regular learns to fly.
Yes.
So tell me, was that just sort of just something you did for a video, went up with a friend, or is that something you're actually working your way towards?
I like the idea of having a pilot's license and being able to fly around. It can be a little bit pricey, but not prohibitively so. But there's an awful lot of book learning to do. It's not so much knowing what every switch does and how to fly the plane.
It's the radio chatter.
Like, oh my goodness, they're speaking a different language, aren't they?
Oh yeah. So with the flight sim stuff that we do, we touch on that a little bit, although we don't really generally, well, at least myself and Mags don't generally do the general aviation, the civil aviation type chatter on radio, where we follow more with we're working on it. We're actually more on the military side, and that's if you think the language that they're speaking in the civil aviation stuff is another language, well, take that language but then completely change it, and then you've got the military version of it.
And these are all just regular folks playing, well, okay, video games are pretend. It's okay to pretend.
Yep. Damn right, it's a lot less expensive than the real thing.
Yeah.
And then for people like Mags, who has a eye condition, I'll let Mags explain that one after I'm done. But it's potentially the only opportunity that some of us will get to actually fly the plane. For various reasons. So there's I'm actually, well, until Rona came and bled all over us with that stupid bat soup everywhere. And before that came along, I was actually putting money aside to actually start going through the process of getting my private pilot's license. But then, one of my two jobs disappeared. So that sort of delayed that significantly. So basically what I'm going to be doing over the next 6 months or so is actually using the flight simulators, because there are actually full communities of people who will actually, there's people who be air traffic controllers in the game.
I have seen videos of humorous videos of
Air Force Proud 95
of some guy who's being I think we know what we're talking about.
Yep, that's the first one. Yeah, he is glorious. He's actually an airline pilot. So he actually and does the civil aviation thing for fun, and then obviously, he's fantastic. But he knows the actual radio calls, but then he has that sense of humor that's just absolutely glorious. And the phrase "Welcome to Steam Edition" is burned into my brain. So any time I see a hot air balloon, I just expect it to go vertical and someone to say "Welcome to Steam Edition." So it's the radio chatter type stuff that's sort of making you a bit apprehensive.
Yeah, you just don't get up and fly. You gotta plan what you're doing, tell someone where you're going, when you're gonna be there.
Yep.
You can't fly here, can't fly there. In the video, we got close to New York City, so you can't go in there. That's controlled airspace. So we're flying above the Jersey Shore, like right on the Atlantic Ocean coastline.
Did you get blinded by the tans, the fake tans?
Nope. This was a few months ago. So this was in the beginning of winter. Wasn't snowing yet, but so it was kind of cold. But I found that the cold helped me not get air sick, and that's another problem I get.
Yeah.
I get air sick in small planes pretty easily.
Yeah, it's sort of just one thing you might want to have a look there. There are, if you're worried about that, there are in the more rural areas, municipal airports. There's uncontrolled airspace where basically you just it's less rigid because you're not having to deal with a tower or air traffic control. You're just talking on the local radio saying, "Hey everyone, I'm taking off on I'm taxiing to this runway. I'm taking off from here, heading out this direction." Yeah, and then you go out and fly. So couple of YouTubers that I recommend that you check out. Trent Palmer.
Okay.
There's what's it? Jonas Marchenko. There's and Mike Patey. I'll give you links to these after the podcast. But they all do bush flying. So bush flying. So they've got those tiny little planes with gigantic big monster truck wheels on them, basically, and they're I consider them like the dirt bikes of the sky.
Yeah.
They just go. They'll just go out flying. Oh, there's a sandbar in that river. That's long enough. Let's go land there, and they go land on it.
Oh, is this one guy who landed on top of like a snow-covered mountain and realized his tires got stuck, and then he had to go get a snowmobile?
That's Jonas Marchenko. So yes.
Okay.
So yeah,
I saw that one.
Yeah, no, that's him and all his sort of ilk. Sort of Mike Patey is the interesting one. He's an entrepreneur, businessman type thing, and he's forever excited to do things. That kind of person, really driven to work on his projects and whatever he's doing. Fantastically infectious. But he built a plane that he called Draco.
Okay.
Now, Draco was based off I think it's a Polish aircraft called a Wilga, or Vilga, is how the correct pronunciation of it. He went a little bit overboard with his design of it. He whacked the big, huge Alaskan bush wheels on it. He beefed up the suspension. He extended and expanded the wings. He did a whole heap of work to it, but he put so I think it was a 700 horsepower turboprop engine in it. Into a small
700 horsepower.
Yeah. So 680 usable horsepower.
That sounds like it should be able to stand on its prop or something like that.
Takeoff run of about 130 feet. Landing run of less than 100 feet.
Unreal.
Yeah. Well, the bush pilots have almost it's not almost. They have created their own sport, and it's essentially super modifying these already super light aircraft by default, and trying to get them so that they can take off and land in the shortest distance possible. There's actually some videos up on YouTube that are worth watching with some of the custom short takeoff and landing bush planes, and they will take off in under 10 feet, and they'll land in the same distance.
Yeah, so I just posted the picture of it, so you can see. I've posted the video. I've got the video running up on the stream at the moment of Draco doing takeoffs and landings at Oshkosh. I believe that's at. And you can see, gigantic big wheels. He's just like, okay, I've stopped, and yeah, it's just incredible. But those guys, if you're worried about the whole procedures thing, the stuff that those guys do will get you fired up, and we'll sort of hopefully sort of get you away from that. And oh god, Mags, why do you have to do this?
No. Just let me get this all out first.
Okay, I'm seeing what looks like Mad Max in the top one with the,
Yep.
I guess, a gigantic rhubar or something like that. And then the off-road lights on the top. And then there's, Drift King down below. He put stickers on half of his windshield so he can see through half of it.
Yep, that is Bogan Ute culture. Then you've got your Outback Ute culture. This is what I'm sort of describing. What most people sort of fall into with your flatbed trays and your big boxes out the back. And some of them, where is the picture that I found before? That was a really good example.
Please find one of those ones with a picture of the one of those that's jacked up into the air and got the testicles hanging off the tow bar.
So I was trying to find one before that was up. It was jacked up, and it's a 6-wheel conversion to give it more coverage for the back end. But then the
6 wheels.
6 wheels. Go double at the back end. Actually, there we go. That's one.
I've seen like a Unimog version of that, or like a Mercedes or something. Yeah.
There you go.
Huh.
Yeah. What? Just to give them a bit, make them so they can carry a little bit more on the back end. And then, and this is the one I think you'll like. If you ever get down to Australia, you need to start looking around for some of these. Custom.
Waiting for
so sidetrack the whole thing. That's a 1971 BMW 1600.
Huh. I've never seen something like that before. It looks like a 2002 for me. Is that something someone made?
Yep. They cut the roof off and turned it into
they cut the back off. Somebody doing the same thing to a Jaguar at the moment. That one there's modification for the process. Now where I know I saw it here before. Where is it? There was one in here that was really good. There it is. There's a few of these getting around. This one here, another one. Going for it to load. That's a BMW M5.
That's interesting.
Yeah, this is the other part of it. The three levels for it. You've got your bogans, which either try and pretend they're utes, essentially, trucks, rigs,
right,
semis, or they turn them into burnout vehicles. You've got the sort of outbackers who just jack them all up, but they're in a practical manner. And then you get stuff like this, where they just take a standard car and cut them down. There's a Subaru WRX that's been converted that I saw a photo of before as well.
Yeah, the Mighty Car Mods guys did that. They went over to America.
Oh, did they?
Them and Roadkill had a thing where they built each other a car. So Mighty Car Mods guys turned a Subaru Impreza into a Ute, a WRX into a Ute, and the Roadkill guys just got them some rusty old piece of shit and just stuck the biggest engine they could possibly fit in it, and then some, and made it a true roadkill car for them, and that was a good episode.
Yeah, the best thing about that video was when Marty and Moog were lying underneath Finnegan and Freiberger's creation on the side of the road, and Marty just looks at the camera and says, I didn't think it was really like this. It's really like this. It's just us, and this thing's broken down, and we have to fix it because it's been thrown together.
Yeah. So before I forget about this, just want to get you to show your wares. So we'll start off. Crash, have you got any videos coming up? I'm picking on you because you've been extraordinarily quiet. You've gone all shy.
Actually, no, I haven't gone shy at all. I've got a few things I'd love to ask Brian about. But first, actually, I'll go with the shilling first. I've a few videos coming up over the next few weeks. Some more 1-minute DCS, finally some IL2 stuff, and possibly some other games. That's really all I have going at the moment.
Mags, what videos you got coming up besides this podcast?
God, this is where I'm running into troubles at the moment. First things first, apologies to all of my viewers. This is the week where everyone's gone back to school, so I'm back into my degree now. Which, as most of you know, I'm in my last year, and if that wasn't fun enough, my son is back at school now too, except he's in the full work from home because we're still full stage 3 lockdown on this end, and still looking like stage 4 might be a possibility. They haven't given up on that option just yet. So I've been a school teacher for most of this week as well. So I've been blunt fuck all done in terms of videos at this point. I'm working on something right now. It's actually why I haven't been too active on this one. For wares, I'm actually doing, obviously doing a design degree. I'm actually working on some masks at the moment. As I understand that there's a few places in the world that have brought up the whole you've got to have something covering your mouth at this point because of the human malware kicking about. So I'm actually working on a couple of masks. I'm looking up one manufacturer at the moment that's independent from Teespring that has a smaller version because it might be a little bit cheaper. But at the moment, I do have one up at the moment that I'm actually trying to get an artwork adjustment done on.
So
that is based on the P40. It is the mouth of the P40 Flying Tiger across the front of the mask. This is up on Teespring right now. The left-hand side of it has kill markings for Japanese aircraft as well as bombing targets, and the right-hand side has the early US Air Force Randall and some 50 cal shell casings just tumbling down the side. So I figure if you got to wear a mask and you're into aircraft, might as well wear a mask that actually relates to your interests. So I'm working on a few more designs for that one. That design that's up at the moment has a slight artwork issue that they're being really slack about fixing. So I'm hoping to have that fixed in the next couple of days. I'm also working on a couple of other designs, and I'm probably going to toss up some gaming related ones, just general gaming. Actually been playing Elder Scrolls Online recently and doing the Dark Brotherhood quests. I'm going to do a Dark Brotherhood themed one as well, just because trying to get them in the stores at the moment is a pain in the ass. These guys print out of the States and out of Europe, so they're relatively local to most people that are watching. And at the very least, you can get some cool custom artwork on it. So, anyways, that's what I have been up to besides school and tearing my hair out and wishing I had more time to actually consider maybe sleeping.
So just on that, I've got something you might be interested in there, Brian. The bog roll zombies one.
Oh yes, bog roll zombies.
What are those?
So did you heard about all those things where no one could get toilet paper? Did you hear about that?
Still can't get toilet paper.
Yeah. Well,
it's still hard to
well,
get.
Well, it's a whole heap of zombies reaching for, instead of brains, toilet paper.
Yeah, I'm taking the piss out of the idiots who oh my god, we have a new virus that's kicking around. Everybody quickly, it's a respiratory disease. It's going to make us cough and sneeze. Better buy the toilet paper out first so we can wipe our asses because oh, fucking idiots. I just wanted to take the piss out of them. So that's where that came from.
So now it's your turn, Brian. What have you got coming up? What do you got?
We have our pitch pilot where we're trying to take this YouTube show and making a version of it that can also be on either Amazon, Netflix, some other streaming services, maybe Disney, maybe, I doubt it, or Motor Trend if they would sponsor it. There comes a point where you can. Sometimes it's unfashionable to talk about money, but there is kind of a limit to YouTube. And some people have stretched the algorithm very far. I'm very jealous of content creators who focus on video games because there is no overhead. You don't have to fly anywhere. It's all online. It's like, get a nice computer. That's it. Of course, there's a little bit more to that, but you don't have to have nice cameras. You don't have to choose a particular car that's good for strapping a camera to the back and going down the road. So if we really want to, and also the algorithm for YouTube is starting to get a little bit family values, or
Yes.
yes.
Mm.
So me talking about the time that the party. Let's see. Well, I think this is going to be my book at some point. It's just going to be called. I wrote the title down somewhere. It's all the way there on the wall. Locations. Places where I've cranked it. So the entire book will be grounded in places where I jerked off. So I couldn't have a video, or you have to be more creative. I mean, I worked in radio for a little bit, and you can't say profanity. You can't be vulgar, but you can be obscene to a point, and that's kind of where YouTube is now. They're. It's not that they're bending to the RIAA or broadcasting standards. It's straight up advertisers. So they want to sell the product. And if you're talking about the time you jerked off in the trunk of your own 2000 Dodge Neon at Kevin Ackery's graduation party, because the party had hit a lull for a point and you needed to spice up the afternoon. Every part of that story is true. Kevin Ackery, I've never known. Kevin Ackery lived across the highway from a run, the Dusselfink, which was this weird kind of German hotel, and also Spa 61, which was one of those rub and tug places, in the dirty bookstore. Figure I could have gone across the street and got some reading material, but I didn't. I just used my imagination. So an entire story about that. But they made BoJack Horseman, so and that went on Netflix, and that was just fine. And even Cartoon Network had Tim and Eric, which were also guys from Pennsylvania. So we got a chance. So what we made is a pitch pilot. And a pitch pilot isn't necessary. A pilot is something that the studio pays for, or a network pays for, that then, I mean, it's straight out of Pulp Fiction. They show it to the people who pick shows, and based on the strength of that show, blah, blah, blah. A pitch pilot is one that you come to the studio with saying, hey, we already know how to do this. We already have a studio. We already have producers. We already have funding. We were able to find a car detailing company that was fine about me. What was my line I used in the integrated commercial in the pitch pilot? Said, you got to put your fan on if you want to jerk off next to your parents' room. Like, you got to do what you got to do when you're in school, and you got to have that beautiful white noise. Sometimes you got to take the fan out of your window and place it on the floor near your door, so there's extra vibration and extra noise. So,
and sometimes that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Well, if you can't hear somebody approaching with the noise, it may be an issue.
Yeah, but
Well,
there's a risk assessment there.
Yeah.
Like, how long are you willing to wait? Everybody has their breaking point.
True.
So our pitch pilot.
The thing is, if they walk into the room, it's their fucking fault.
Yeah.
And they'll never come back.
I have this one friend of mine. I'm not going to say his name, but I knew him in university, and he lived in the same floor of the dormitories that I did, and he didn't lock his dormitory door ever. Sometimes he left it open a crack. So my one friend, Nika, she walked in on Guy. Let's just call him Tim. And so he walks in on Tim. Nah, I'm not going to use Tim as a name. He walked in on Charlie. So Charlie was at his computer, pants around his ankles, looking at porn on his computer. Nika opens the door, and without breaking stroke, Charlie looks at her and goes, "Hey, what's up? Jerking off right now." And she just closes the door again.
Oh,
I can almost match that with on one window, or on one side of my apartment, I have a kind of a mirror contact on the windows. Yeah. And it's just give a little bit of privacy. But a friend of mine had called around when I was fitting it. And I said, "Oh, I'm putting this on the windows, blah, blah, blah." But every year I hold a New Year bash. And there were lots of friends, and this particular friend called first dibs on one of the bedrooms. So the following day, New Year's Day, he said to me, "By the way," he said, "have you got that mirror contact on all the windows?" And I said, "Well, just on the living room and kitchen." And his face just dropped. And apparently he was in the bedroom and in one of the bedrooms, and he was making a hand shandy. And there were people looking at him from other windows, and he was just looking back at them. And yeah, interesting times.
Oh God.
That's what you call. You got to have good. I think the comedian Adam Carolla said that's called speng shui.
Oh, there's so many horrible, horrible mental images going through my mind right now.
So that's regular car reviews. A lot of nonsense, and we'll talk about the car a little bit. And the pitch pilot we made, it's on YouTube. Let me get a link for you guys. Maybe you already have it.
I have it. So I actually had it running for the first part of the explanation of what you got coming up. So
yeah. So that is filmed professionally with red cameras in, well, I don't know what Reds record at far higher than 4K. It's like 6K or 8K.
8K.
Yeah. Unbelievable. And of course, it came down to 4K because that's as much as, like, unless you have your own screening room at your house, you're not going to be able to see the full resolution that this was shot at. But it's there. It's movie quality. And it's as good or better than any car show. I mean, this is beyond Top Gear a few years ago, the quality of this. And that's another thing. Top Gear isn't going to last forever. Someone's going to take their place. Someone has to. And they tried to export it to the US. There were other shows. You had Tiff Nadell with Fifth Gear. There was the USA version of Top Gear, which was The Australian version was better. They had more freedom to do what they wanted.
But it wasn't that much better.
No,
I lost interest in all versions of Top Gear after Mr. Clarkson punched that guy in the mouth.
Yep.
And
that's the thing.
I tried watching the Grand Tour, but I didn't even finish watching the first season. I'd lost the urge to watch it.
I still watch it now, but I like the Grand Tour, that is. But I had the same thing with Top Gear, and Top Gear's problem was Top Gear wasn't a very good car show. Let's be blunt here. Top Gear wasn't a very good car show. Top Gear was a fantastic personality show that had three people that had some really good on-camera presence and meshed really well. They drove the show. The actual quality, if you strip them out and their humor out and their personalities out and actually look at what's left over, what's left of Top Gear isn't all that great, which shows in the ratings of what the BBC has had for Top Gear since they left. Because essentially the people that they had coming in to take the place of Captain Slow and Clarkson and Buddy
Hamster.
I forget Hamster.
Yeah.
They didn't have that presence, and they didn't have that chemistry, and they didn't have that almost, that completely unscripted humor. They sounded like people reading out of a teleprompter, and so the show then had to rely on its car show roots in order to be able to stand up, and it didn't.
No,
it survived mostly on its own branding, is what's kept it going up until this point, as far as I'm concerned. And well, you can sort of see it in part of the reason why people don't like the Grand Tour. Falls into a very similar thing. The Grand Tour isn't a car show at all. It's actually closer to the 90s holiday shows more than anything. Is what it more is. It's just those personalities doing something different. And a lot of the reason why people don't get along with the Grand Tour is because it hasn't got that car route in it. It is that 90s travel show, but just with the personalities from the car show you used to watch, that really, if you're honest, wasn't a good car show, but was just a great personality show.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's overproduced as well.
Oh yeah, a lot of spoons in that chili.
Yeah, there are too many chiefs and not enough Indians, basically. I mean, the thing with what's it called, Top Gear, was it was driven by the three personalities, where this doesn't feel like it has their fingerprint on it.
Nope.
Yeah, it is. I will say that is I do like the Grand Tour. I don't watch it as much as I used to watch Top Gear. I used to fight and claw to try and get Top Gear in Australia because it wasn't always aired. So occasionally I had to how do I put this? I had to jump in a little rowboat and paddle out into deep waters in order to be able to actually get my hands on the latest Top Gear episodes because they just were not shown in Australia. They weren't aired, or we'd only be getting repeats while the actual series was 2 seasons ahead, and there's a lot of that kind of crap goes on down this end of the world. So to try and keep up with it was actually really difficult to do.
The Grand Tour, a lot of rum consumed there too.
Yeah, the Grand Tour, I still watch it, but I don't have that drive to go out of my way to watch it. I watch it because I have easy access to it because I have Amazon. And it's there, and I do like the guys, so it is something that I watch my way through. I just put it on the background and go about doing whatever I'm doing, usually on a design tablet or whatever else, and I'm drawing away. That show is also only driven by them as well. But you're right, it should have been, if they wanted to do that show perfectly, is just basically give them a film crew, a check to go somewhere, and tell them to go do stupid stuff and leave it at that.
Yeah.
That's all it needed to be.
Totally.
But it's just like that line from Ford v Ferrari, where the Christian Bale character was saying, they're all going to congratulate you, and then they're going to go back to their offices and invent ways to screw you because they got to please their boss, who's got to please their boss, who's got to please their boss. So there's all these stupid things going on. So with regular cars, for it being a show, either on name your streaming service, you've eliminated the host completely. They just don't appear. I mean, I appear briefly in it, but it's not like I'm acting. It's completely in voiceover, where you just stay focused on this automobile, or rather, in this one, the history around it. Of course, we also take tangents because it's also really a show about becoming a father. So that's where you get it, that regular car reviews can do something that other car shows can't, is talk about the cultural impact and also the societal impact of this car, how it relates to you in your life, in addition to a review or a presentation of how it's put together and is it a good car to have? Because a Westfalia sucks. It's a terrible, terrible vehicle. But the emotion that it drives for people is amazing, and people in the U.S. are paying $10,000 U.S. for these things.
Funny thing,
which I believe is 12 or 13,000 Australia.
Yeah, that's the only Westphalia. They're called by a different name here in Australia and I believe the UK as well. But same thing. But that's the only one of those that I've ever seen, at least highlighted, that actually has the original engine in it. Every other one that I've seen either has a Subaru Impreza WRX motor, either the 4-cylinder or the 6-cylinder, or they've stuck a Porsche engine in it.
Yeah, because those engines can cool themselves. They were built better. Even the Subaru one, like we had, they would do the EJ22 swap is the one to do in the US, because those ones are the super cheap ones. I believe in Australia and New Zealand, they also had an EJ15 or something, like a 1.5 liter. Ours never went down that small. But so I think ours was the same block that may have been bored and stroked or something like that. So, but the EJ22 gives you like 130 horsepower over. Actually, I'm sorry, I can't do the math in my head to make it in kilowatts.
Don't worry, we can work in.
We work in both.
Okay. So yeah, that's the thing to do. Even in the Beatles, that's the thing. Just ditch that engine completely. I believe my buddy Justin Kramer, we did a video on one of his bugs that he bought a bug. He didn't like them, but he's a mechanic. I got to learn how to work on these. So we just bought one. And he says, well, if you ignore the build quality and the performance and any sense you have of your own personal well-being, it's not that bad of an automobile. And yes, that air-cooled engine has airflow, but they didn't put a temp sensor in that car because they didn't want to freak people out knowing that your oil may be turning into lava back there as you go up a long hill. But because of the construction, like these engines run forever. Yeah, as long as you keep repairing them forever. They do have a little bit of that AK-47, like there's extra space in there, so their junk can get in that engine and it can keep running, but they don't run really well ever. That's my own rant on Volkswagen air-cooled 4s. And then, of course, the Wasserboxer that's in the Westfalia was an air-cooled engine that they just put a bunch of water wings on and just there it's air-cooled. There it's water-cooled. Now it's a water-cooled modern engine. Okay.
It's kind of also illogical to put an air-cooled engine at the back of something where it's not going to trap air coming in to cool it.
It's so bizarre. General Motors tried that a little bit with the Corvair in the 60s. But I guess the difference is the Corvair it was a larger car, so the engine compartment had more volume of air in it. So you weren't starting at a deficit. You didn't put an engine in a shoebox and expect it to not overheat.
Yeah. Well, to be fair with the Beetle, they probably, when they originally designed it, didn't expect to be continuing to make them for quite as long as they wound up making them.
Yeah.
Remember when that thing was when that thing was first designed, there was still a chance that Nazi Germany might actually win World War II, and the top speed on the roads was probably about 50 kilometers per hour at tops. But 30 mile an hour. It probably wasn't horrible then. It's just for some reason they decided to never stop making the freaking things.
They were
I'm going to say now.
Revenge here.
Yeah, I do have to say I have odd thoughts about the Beetle, but I've never been inside of a original one or a stock one before. Ever. The only Beetle that I ever went for a ride in was actually a Beetle that was modified by somebody my father knew because he was very much into his cars. And it was a all-wheel drive conversion with a twin-turbo Porsche engine in the back end on NOS. And that thing scared the absolute shit out of me. It was all sorts of scary. You got out of the car and I needed to go to a chiropractor to put my spine back into place because it tried to rip out of my back as my head tried to peel it out due to the acceleration. And the thing was that the thing had no clearance either. It was one of those bugs that were on the ground with the high camber. And I was sort of looking at the high camber on the wheels, like, why you got the high camber on the wheels? He tried to turn it, and you suddenly realized it needed it. It wasn't just there to be showy. He would try and throw this thing into a corner at 140 kilometers per hour, and it would go round. Of course, you felt like you were about to exit the vehicle at the time. So that's my only experience with bugs, and it was I think originally it was a early 70s bug as well.
So we're going to wrap it up shortly. Crash, did you have any more questions before we let Brian?
Absolutely, Brian, I was wondering, first of all, have you got a background in writing?
Yes, I was an English teacher.
Yep. Because that's what I think. That's when the first video I ever saw of yours, and I have a peripheral interest in cars, but the first video I ever saw of yours was an Oldsmobile of about 4 years ago. Video about the Oldsmobile, and the thing that immediately struck me was the pros. The only thing that comes closest to it, and the same thing, I would only have a peripheral interest in food apart from staying alive. And it instantly reminded me in a very good way of some of the work that Anthony Bourdain did about
Oh,
food.
you're too kind. Thank you.
I know, but seriously, it is that impressive. And I'd advise anybody, even if you're not really interested in cars, go watch this. The second question I had for you was really regarding car branding. I mean, we've all seen, obviously, the story of the Starion, where there was a phone call between a Japanese and an American executive,
Yeah.
and there was a company in England called Vauxhall, and they launched this car called the Nova. And they launched it with Mexican music and everything else. And then somebody told them, listen, Nova means no go in Spanish.
Yep.
But I was wondering, have you seen any other I mean, the one that strikes me is Oldsmobile. That would really stop me buying it if I didn't know anything about it, because I'd say, what, does this come with incontinence seats or something?
Yeah.
It sounds like a mobile for old people.
It is an old car for old people.
Yeah. Oh, then it makes sense.
There's never really, I guess there was the Oldsmobile 442. That was a fast version of it. But Oldsmobile had a very strange place in General Motors lineup. General Motors is this gigantic Hoover that just sucks up other car brands and then eventually just starves them out and then just absorbs them into themselves.
Destroys them.
Yeah. GM has some very good creations, but they are one of these too big to fail companies. During the 60s, they were 3 times the size of Ford. I don't know how different they are now. They get most of the government contracts, and that keeps them alive. Ford
they're downscaling pretty hard. That's what I was sort of implying near the start. General Motors Holden has been dying a long death in Australia for a while. Well, they axed it this year. It's not going to exist as a brand in Australia. So after being one of the car companies that sort of made ute culture a thing, and being basically an icon of Australia and producing some fantastic cars, and because they wanted to downscale globally, they're cutting its throat, and all vehicles that are coming into Australia from GM from this point on are essentially going to be converted grey imports, where we're bringing over left-hand drive cars from the States, and there's going to be one line in the Holden plant, which is actually run by what was HSV, the performance brand for Holden Australia. And their job now, instead of working on performance cars, is going to be to put the steering wheel on the right-hand side of the car. And that's all they will be doing, and that's all of it that'll exist. And even the branding for the actual car yards is in question, whether or not they'll exist anymore. They're not even sure about that now, whether or not the Holden car yards will survive. I know a couple of the local ones around here. There's 2 that are relatively close to me, and I know that one of them has already said that regardless of what decision is made on that, they're actually rebranding to Kia, Hyundai, and I think they're in negotiation with Mitsubishi, and they're just gonna can it completely. So yeah, that's I've very down thoughts on GM at this point, because they basically came down here, fucked up all of our good car designs, tried to tell the Australian public, no, don't worry, we're not going to replace the car designs you had, which were all rear-wheel drive V8 powered 4-door sedans. We're going to give you this front-wheel drive 4-cylinder diesel, and you're going to like it. We're not going to give you anything else. So of course everybody went over, and all the Holden fans in Australia, because Ford and Holden was a big rivalry in Australia, switched over to Ford, because Ford decided to bring the V8 Mustang down, and the V8 Mustang sold so well that the waiting queue is still over a year long at this point in time, and was up to 3 years long at one point. We are buying them faster than the factories in the States can build them. They cannot convert enough to feed them at the moment, because basically all the Ford fans that were into their V8 Fords bought a Mustang. All the Holden fans that were V8 Holden fans also bought a Mustang, because even though they've got the Camaro and the Corvette, GM decided that neither car was applicable for Australia, and they weren't going to bring them down, and didn't decide to bring them down until late last year, at which point everybody had already gone, fuck GM. And nobody cares. Which
Do
is
your
even funny.
import laws are they
Good.
like are they written the same as New Zealand's, where you can bring over stuff of any year as long as it's like a rare car or an unusual thing?
No, it's even more flexible than that. You can bring in pretty much anything you want. But when it gets here,
within a limit.
um,
If it was built here locally or sold here locally, it's there's time limits about when you can actually bring that vehicle over.
yeah.
So
Okay.
But
like
international,
15 years, I think, or something like that, since it was
yeah,
last produced, or something like that.
yeah.
Okay.
But most international stuff can be bought straight over, no problems at all. To drive it over here is a little bit different. You can get permits for cars of certain ages to get permission to drive them in original configuration. So, classic American cars, all left-hand drive. You can get special licensing and permissions for them to be able to keep them in left-hand drive configuration. Most want conversions to right-hand drive to be able to get them, and then those have to be engineered and approved by all of our road authorities. They have to be safety tested, and there's a whole big chain of things you have
Okay.
to go through. You got to get engineering certificates and the rest of it to prove that it's safe to be on the road. Roadworthy vehicles are very big over here.
Mm.
The laws regarding them are very, very, very tight. But we do have
Or
the capability to convert them. If you have a big enough checkbook, you can convert any vehicle to make it legal to drive on Australian roads, and you'll be able to get a permit for it. It's just how much you're willing to pay.
Right. If this is an idea for some a YouTube series
Mm.
in the future, is either coming to New Zealand or Australia or the UK for that matter, and buying like a classic Mustang over
Mhm.
here, where it'd be really cheap, transporting it, putting it on the container ship, bringing it overseas, and then selling it and seeing if you could flip it. I wouldn't be
Oh,
driving it in the
absolutely.
other country.
Absolutely, you could. There are car yards here that do that right now. There's actually a business model in Australia where you can go to a for a classic car retailer,
Mhm.
and you'll tell them, look, I want a 1967 fastback Mustang. I want it in this trim. I want it with these details, and I wanted this. I want it to at least be mostly original. I don't want much in the way of modifications, if possible. And they will have people that work the auction yards over in the States, and they will search, and they'll search other parts of the world too if they think they can find one. And when they find it, they'll buy it, grab whatever is extra in the order, put it into a shipping crate, bring it down to Australia, and they'll sell it and they'll make a profit on it.
Nice.
It was actually better at one point. There was
the
a possible to buy some pre-converted cars in Australia for certain things. I'm thinking US pickups like F-150s and stuff like that.
Ah,
But it was actually cheaper to actually get an auctioneer in the States to purchase an American one, put it in a shipping crate, bring it back, and get it right-hand drive converted yourself than it was to buy the one that was already professionally done here in Australia. So yeah, there's a
really?
whole market for that. The grey imports are big in Japan too.
Yep.
Skyline, Supras, and anything that comes out of Japan. Not so much Europe. Europe actually sends most of its stuff out here outside of a couple of things. We can usually get it. But out of the States and out of Japan, yeah, definitely. And yeah, if you bought a Mustang down here, you'd have no problem selling it.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
Mighty Car Mods, pretty. They've done that a few times. Imported cars from Japan. So that it's not quite as easy as Max puts out, because there are things regarding asbestos. So if there's
Ah,
even a hint that there may have been asbestos in any of the parts of the car, like brake pads or firewall or internal engine components or whatever, can't bring it in. So
hmm.
Mighty Car Mods brought in a 240Z, and it had no brakes, no engine, no gearbox, because they had to take all of that out to get it into the country.
Oh, okay.
So they stuck an RB26 turbo into it, and it like makes some stupid amount of power.
Nice.
Chaser says GTR R34 still can't get it in the States. Yeah, there's one like 6 doors from my house. There's actually quite a lot of them out here. They were really popular at one point up in my particular area of rural Victoria. So R34s are R34s, and there's a surprisingly large amount of Supras floating around. Basically, the Fast and the Furious 1 and 2 cars got really popular, and they're still here.
So anyway, it's gone about half an hour or so past when I thought we'd wrap it up. So we kind of got sidetracked. So we'll wrap it up here. So where can everyone find you on the internet there, Brian?
You've got Regular Cars on Twitter, Regular Cars on Instagram, and of course on YouTube, Regular Car Reviews. Or if you're even want to get them all, just type in Regular Car Reviews on Google, and we're the first 2 pages.
And just one last request before I finish up the stream. Can you do the voice?
Yes, I can do the voice. I can give it to you right now. You can come into my bed. I just bought shiny sheets. You slide all around. Your head starts on the pillow and ends up in my lap. Because that's where the traction is.
If anyone
Thank you very much.
wanted to know what Dead Meat and Lobby sounded like having an orgasm, that's it.
I giggle like a girl.
I'm still recovering.
All of that's true. I bought fancy sheets and fancy pillow covers. They have very low friction on them. I slide all around.
There's a story that I'm not going to get to on any podcast about that. But anyway, thank you for coming along tonight. It was a very unexpected and last minute thing. So obviously we were completely disorganized and unprofessional, and so pretty much standard. So thank you very much for coming, and enjoy your 48 hours of getting onto any podcast you can get your hands on.
Yep, can do. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, guys.
Good night.
Good night.